Snow and ice totals are increasing with this blockbuster historic storm on the way this weekend. All the details in today's video. Welcome in, everybody. Hopefully we're having an all right Thursday out there, and we're finally at the point that we can start talking potential totals with this storm system. I've got a region by region breakdown for you in today's video. If you're new to the channel, though, welcome in, everybody. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorologist at WCCB Charlotte. If you haven't already, go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell for the latest notifications. Doing all those things, folks, it's free. It doesn't cost you anything. All it does is help me continue to run this channel for free, and it's just me here. There's no corporate strings behind me pulling the levers, just me, you, and the weather. So I think that's the best way to run this, and I think many of you enjoy it that way. So doing all of those things really helps me continue that, and we're on the road to 100,000 subscribers. It will be here, I'm sure, sooner than many of us will believe it. But with that said, let's get right on into it. I don't want to take up all of your time today. You can see next to me, this is the latest run of our European computer model. And it continues to show this blockbuster storm, folks. I think snow totals are really trending up for parts of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast. We've got ice totals that we could get half an inch to an inch plus of ice, folks. Anything past an inch, that's whenever you start getting catastrophic problems out there in terms of travel, in terms of power, in terms of infrastructure. And we could see that in parts of the country here over the next couple of days as we continue to track this storm. In fact, we're so close now, we officially have our first winter storm warning in effect with this storm through parts of Oklahoma and into parts of the Red River Valley of Texas, right there in those pink colors you see on your map. That's where winter storm warnings, including Oklahoma City and back down into even southwestern Oklahoma, are seeing the potential here for blockbuster levels of snow and ice. So it's going to be a big one, and I expect more of these warnings to be added throughout the day today, further east, likely getting all the way into the Carolinas by tonight, if not then by tomorrow, expecting those winter storm warnings to go into effect. So yeah, Arizona all the way up to New York State getting involved on this storm. That is one of the reasons that it will truly be a historic one for some folks. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and break down the setup a little bit more in depth, give you the latest model data, and then go to that region by region breakdown of how much snow and ice you could see right in your front yard. Well, folks, last night the hurricane hunters, yes, that's right, the hurricane hunters flew into some of our upper level energy that is going to come together to create this big winter storm. And I think because of that data that the models were able to ingest overnight, we are finally getting a much clearer picture of what's going to happen this weekend. And that's why I feel confident enough today on Thursday that we can start talking about those totals. This is the piece of energy that they flew into back out just off the west coast of California. You see that little circle or that lobe of vorticity, as we say, this being a spin map or a vorticity map. And this is one of the most important tools when forecasting in meteorology. Spin, and whether it's cyclonic or anticyclonic and all these other things, really help to induce or limit rising motion in the atmosphere. Now, that's not the only piece of energy. The other lobe that matters is up here on the north side, up into Canada. And I kind of try to explain it like this to folks. I'll circle this one in blue. This is our cold energy, okay? This is what's bringing the Arctic air down from Canada. Meanwhile, the other piece of energy I circled out near California, this is our warm and our moist energy. So you've got, obviously, combining forces here. You've got cold air, and then you've got warm air and moisture. That's why we are going to see a ton of whatever falls from the sky, is all of the warmth and moisture, as well as why some of us could see an ice storm that we haven't seen in a decade plus into parts of the southeast, because that warm air cuts out the snow, but the cold air is still there, and that leads to ice. So that's a little bit on kind of the upper level dynamics here, but you can see how they eventually come together and combine right into here. They kind of start to scoop each other up and combine forces right over the heart of the country, hence why, again, we're going to have this big storm. On top of that, we've got plenty of low-level cold air, and I want to make this a point because, I don't want to sleep on the ice part of this. Snow totals are trending up, so is ice, and this is one of the reasons why. Down at the surface, or right above the surface, we have this Arctic air mass working in. It's that blue line and up. That's where temperatures are going to be below freezing, about a mile or so above our head, a little bit less than that technically here at 850 millibars. But on top of that, if you look to the south, look at all this very warm air in the Gulf, and the wind barbs are coming from the south. So all of that warm air is plowing into this cold air, and that's creating a lot of lift and a giant warm nose, as we say, or basically an inversion in the atmosphere, where at the surface, it's actually colder than it is up here about a mile above our head. So that's another recipe for big ice. But if you're further north, you're getting all the lift from that, but you're still cold enough up here into parts of the Ohio Valley, the Northeast, especially the northern mid-Atlantic. You don't really have to worry about that mixing as much. You're going to be just fine with plenty of snow. So you can see the setup here. It's going to give us a mixed bag of options of precipitation that is likely to fall. Let's go ahead now and break down our two global models. You'll see they've come into much better agreement since the last night, and then start talking about those potential totals. I'll start with the American model, or the GFS, and you'll slowly see here that I think the European and the GFS are kind of meeting in between. And I think we're done with any massive shifts in the models. I think now it's kind of fine-tuning the details on exactly what will fall and how much of it. But we're coming into much better agreement that I think the track is finally coming to an agreement point, like I mentioned. So the GFS, it's more of the same here back out west. This is starting tomorrow evening. So we backed the storm up a little bit in time for most folks by about 6 to 12 hours, which is also partially one of the reasons why many folks are going to end up with more ice than snow than you had hoped maybe 3 or 4 days ago, or not even that long ago. It feels like 3 or 4 days ago. It's probably a day or two ago in reality. But time's always different when you're tracking a winter storm. It seems like it moves in slow motion. Anyway, by overnight tomorrow and into Saturday, yeah, that's right, overnight tomorrow, we're getting here, folks. Snow breaking out. I think I-40 northbound should be mostly snow. You might start as maybe a little bit of a mix with some other frozen precipitation types, but then changing to snow as that cold press from the high pressure up to your north starts to push south. And you can see plenty of blue breaking out over Oklahoma. Heck, even Kansas getting in on this. Thanks to that north trend we've seen over the past couple of days. The Ozarks going to get really good snow. Further south, Dallas, Fort Worth, you probably start as rain, then you change to ice. Same thing into southern Arkansas, northern Louisiana, going to be an icy mess out of this. And then here we go. It starts to get into the Carolinas by overnight Saturday, really Saturday evening. And you can see we've got the purple being sleet, the pink being snow, or excuse me, the pink being ice rather, and the blue being snow. And it's stretching literally from New Mexico all the way to the Carolinas and Virginia, heck, all the way up to Maryland at this point on the model, at least this model of the GFS, which, you know, again, take it with a grain of salt. I'll show you the European next. You'll have a slightly different solution. But you get the idea, folks. It's an icy mess. Dallas, northern Louisiana, northern Mississippi, up into southern Tennessee. We've got snow up into Kentucky, West Virginia. Eventually, the warm nose starts doing numbers, and you can start to see how things lay out. At this point, it has been hours of good, heavy snow into northern Virginia, northern West Virginia, Maryland, into Delaware. This is by Sunday morning, even into Kentucky. Heck, the backside here, it's still snowing into parts of Oklahoma, the Ozarks, southern Illinois, and southern Indiana. Also, it has been hours of ice, whether that is sleet or freezing rain. The GFS likes sleet a lot more into the Piedmont of the Carolinas. It shows a big sleet storm in Charlotte, Raleigh, Asheville, Greenville, Spartanburg, all the way down towards Lawrence County, out into Rock Hill, Cheraw, Jefferson, Fayetteville, a lot of these communities. The GFS is a lot more excited about the potential for sleet than freezing rain. But even the GFS eventually has trended a bit towards the Euro. Although I will say the Euros also come back south a little bit, which you'll see in a moment. By Sunday afternoon, the freezing rain line starts to work in. And something to note, folks, is a little bit of meteorology 101 here. The cold air press is so strong here with the cold air damming down the backside of the Appalachian chain that you're getting the reverse effect into the Tennessee Valley, where what goes up must come down. That's my number one rule in meteorology. In this case, what goes up in terms of pressure must come down in terms of pressure on the other side of the mountains, meaning pressure lowers on the Tennessee side, and that actually helps ramp up this warm nose even more. So a place like Nashville, especially Knoxville, Chattanooga, you're probably going to start as some sort of frozen precipitation. Then by Sunday afternoon, you could switch over to rain. Would not surprise me at all. You keep it going, and it's still freezing rain and ice into the Piedmont and foothills of North Carolina. Raleigh still getting in on that. Snow breaking out into the Northeast, folks. We're going to see more than a foot of snow for a big swath of the Northeast. Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York City, Connecticut, Rhode Island, up into Massachusetts. This looks like a solid snowstorm for you. You keep it going, and something I like about the GFS, not so much on the European, you'll see, is the GFS keeps this cat in place much longer into the Carolinas. The Euro almost tries to erode it a little bit. I think it's doing it too quickly. The GFS keeps it ice the entire time. Maybe you briefly end as rain in upstate South Carolina and maybe even southern North Carolina, probably definitely out into the Sandhills, but maybe even into the Charlotte area. But I think you're all ice the entire time in Greensboro, up into Danville, up into that region. Even Charlotte, I'd be very surprised if we get anything that's not frozen out of this before the storm continues cranking. It's still snowing Monday morning into the Northeast. It's still snowing Monday afternoon into the Northeast, and then cranks down by Monday evening. That's the latest GFS. Let me show you the European European model now, and you'll see some similarities and some differences, but overall, they've definitely come into better alignment since yesterday. Well, the European model starts similar enough. We've got ice in the Red River Valley. We've got snow I-40 North, including the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. You keep it going, and it's a similar tune. Honestly, it looks very similar starting off as the GFS did. I'll go ahead and move to a point that it gets kind of different. Now, it starts the same for most folks back out west of the Mississippi. You get east of the Mississippi, it's pretty similar. This is where things change up a bit. You can still see that same thing I mentioned Saturday night, that warm nose creeping up. Alabama, this actually won't be all that bad for you unless you're in extreme northern Alabama. It's going to, have a lot more rain probably than anything. In fact, a flood watch might be needed. You're going to get that much rain. We're talking 3 to 4 inches there in parts of the state. But it's the same for the north. Snow into Kentucky, southern Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, West Virginia, Virginia starting off as snow. But the key difference is for folks really in the Carolinas on the European. You can see it here. We're starting basically straight as ice. There is not much sleet. There's definitely not a whole lot of snow on the European, maybe very briefly up into the Triad, maybe even briefly into Charlotte. You can start as a sleet snow mix, but it quickly changes to freezing rain. And because of that, the European is a much worse ice storm. Check it out. By overnight Saturday, you've got freezing rain from Atlanta to Columbia up into all of upstate South Carolina, Pickens, Walhalla, Anderson, all the way down to Greenwood, over into Simpsonville. I know we had a viewer watching last night in Simpsonville on the live stream. Yeah, plenty of communities getting a big time ice out of this overnight Saturday. So one of those things, if you live in those areas, if you live in North Carolina, especially the Piedmont, Charlotte, Statesville, out towards Shelby, Gastonia, even down towards Monroe, Wadesboro, all these communities, you're going to go to sleep probably Saturday night and think, all right, it's not that bad. And then you're going to wake up Sunday morning to potentially 1/4 of an inch to maybe as much as 1/2 an inch of ice in some areas. That is a stout CAD, bringing a lot of precipitation with it as well. Now, if there's anything that could go wrong for the forecast, and by go wrong, I really mean good for the Carolinas here, I do see a world where potentially the heaviest axis of precipitation shifts north up into Virginia. That would be great for us. We would cut down what right now looks like 1 inch to 1.5 inches of QPF, or total precipitation to work with. If we can cut it down to 7/10 or 1/2 an inch, that would be much better for us in terms of the ice situation, because right now, if the European was right, there would be widespread 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch of ice along the 85 corridor, and that would cripple many communities through much of next week, even if you include the power outages and the downed trees and things like that. So you keep it going, and you can see it holds on. Now, then the European by Sunday afternoon, up north, we're puking snow, as I like to say. I mean, this is good snow. This is the good stuff. This is a very high ratio, meaning it will accumulate very well into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, a good front end thumping of snow there. Same thing for Maryland, Northern Virginia, and then into the Northeast. Then you can see on the European, as I mentioned, that warm air really starts cranking. I mean, you've got warm air all the way into East Tennessee. Heck, on the western side of the Appalachian chain into West Virginia, you're changing to rain. You're changing to rain into Eastern Kentucky. Now, will it get that far north? It very well could. What I don't buy as much is how much it erodes the CAD here. It tries changing you back to rain in all of North Georgia. Now, maybe I could see that, but I'm more skeptical that Greenville, Spartanburg, Travelers Rest, Chesney, areas like that, I would be pretty surprised if you change over to rain for any significant amount of time. The European tries to do it. I think it's eroding that CAD a little too quickly. That CAD often is much stronger than the models think it is, and then just gets another very heavy round of precipitation, whether that's rain, ice, or snow. We'll see what ends up happening here by this is Sunday evening. And then just keeps on cranking up a snowstorm into the Northeast, folks, and it's a big one for sure, and then finally winds down by overnight Monday. All right, those are our two latest models. You can see coming into better agreement, still some differences, but a lot closer, I'd say, than they were yesterday. Now, let's get to what you probably care about. How much snow, how much ice? Let me show you the latest. Here's the latest blend of models, and I think now that we're seeing better agreement in the models, the blend is going to do an even better job than it already has in terms of totals. And it's going to be a lot of snow out here into the Central Plains. We'll start out here, I think Oklahoma City, right in that 8 to 12 inches range. Maybe 6 to 10 is a more conservative number to give, but also all the way up to Tulsa. The further north you go in Oklahoma, the better odds you're going to have of seeing double-digit snowfall. But you can see the swath here is for real, and even stretches all the way into the southern Ozarks, or I should just say the Ozarks in general. Southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, 1/2 foot to 10 inches plus of snow looks pretty common. At Kansas, you have trended up a lot with this. You didn't look like a whole lot a couple days ago. Now, 1/2 foot of snow. So, yeah, it's one to mention, even getting snow all the way up into Nebraska. You go further south, it's going to be more ice than anything down into the Texas area. Dallas-Fort Worth, 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 half an inch of ice looks pretty easy to come by. Some people will get more than that. Where we could see some of the highest totals out of this storm in terms of ice is going to be southern Arkansas, into Texarkana, extreme northern Louisiana, and then into extreme northwestern Mississippi, right into the Delta region. Somebody in there could get an inch of ice. I would not be surprised at all. I think even some of these numbers are a little conservative. You could see, generally speaking, this is around a half an inch up to 3/4 of an inch. That I think is a pretty good forecast. I would not be mad if a local meteorologist said that there. But there is the potential for an inch of ice plus. And that is when things get really bad. That's when you start getting catastrophic damage. That's when these towns are going to be shut down for quite some time due to the cleanup process. And you'll see as we keep moving this east, the other problem is, Texas power crews, they can't come to South Carolina and North Carolina to help because they got to help in Texas. So the power supply companies and the repairmen and women and all that, they're going to get stretched thin pretty bad here, unfortunately, due to the size of the storm. So that's something to keep in mind as well with power outages. All right, Ohio Valley. Going to get a lot of snow up here. I think southern Indiana, southern Ohio, northern Kentucky could be a hot spot with around a foot of snow easily. The ratio is going to be very good. You're not going to have to deal with mixing right along the Ohio River. Now, southern Kentucky, and especially out here into eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, and maybe even up into the western part of West Virginia there, that warm nose could come in at the end and, cut down on some of these totals. But right into here along the Ohio River, I think 8 to 12 inches is a very safe bet. You could easily see some spots more than that, a foot to a foot and a half of snow. Further south, Nashville, you're going to be on that fine line where it could be a real mixed bag of everything. Snow, sleet, freezing rain. So the northern suburbs, maybe 3 to 5 inches. The southern suburbs, maybe 1 to 3 before potentially even rain takes over at some point in time. All right, that is the Ohio River Valley and areas further back out into the plains. Now let's take a look at ice in this region and then the mid-Atlantic and northeast. All right, so ice, like I said, going to be a big concern. Now, there's not going to be as much in Kentucky and Tennessee as kind of on each of your flanks. The Carolina is going to get it really bad, and back into the Delta region, going to get it really bad. But for you specifically, I think, honestly, you're going to get saved a little bit by the configuration of this because it will be snow up north, so that's why you have less there. As for Tennessee, I think it's going to be a lot of sleet probably and some snow, and then some freezing rain definitely shown here. But then I think the warm nose might actually kick in for areas like Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, this kind of region circled in there on your map to where you might actually end up as all rain, and that could help out. But still, 1/4 of an inch of ice into parts of these states, that's enough to cause big problems for sure. All right. Switching over to the mid-Atlantic, and we'll talk about the Carolina ice and all on this map. In terms of snowfall, I mean, folks, this could be a really big storm. And I feel like it's not getting talked a lot about due to the ice, which, rightfully so. The ice is going to be arguably the most dangerous part of this storm. But check out, this is the blend of models. This isn't one crazy run. We're talking a foot to 2 feet, a foot to 18 inches in Philly, especially I think just north of Philly, back out into Baltimore. I think around a foot of snow, not a bad idea. DC, you could start mixing at times, but with the front end thump, 8 to 12 inches, I think is a safe bet easily. I mean, some of the blend here get up to 20 inches in New Jersey. This could be the big one for the season for a lot of folks up this way. And it's not happening in your classic perfect Miller A. It's kind of a Miller B storm really more than anything. But due to how much cold air there is and how much moisture, it doesn't matter. This really could be a big storm, a foot to some people, mixing in very isolated spots, upwards of 2 feet of snow in those very purplish colors on your map, at least the dark purple up into the northeast. Further south into the Carolinas, this is just not our snowstorm. If we're lucky, it'll be a lot of sleet and it won't be a lot of ice. You could see some front end snow very briefly, especially up here into the high country of North Carolina, southwestern Virginia, kind of I-40 north. That's where you're going to have the best shot of a front end thumping of snow. But I think in Charlotte, Greenville, Spartanburg, all up and along the I-85, this is going to be maybe an inch or two of sleet. I could see that as a possibility. Unfortunately, though, that very quickly changes over to ice. Check out the latest blend of models on ice. This, I think, is an okay forecast for now, but fine-tuning the details when we find out exactly how much precipitation is going to work in by tomorrow, we'll have that way more down, I think. we could up these totals, absolutely. But right now, a conservative around half an inch of ice in Greenville, Spartanburg, Pickens, Oconee counties, all the way down into Anderson. North Georgia going to get it bad as well. Now, you could change terrain at the end, but the damage will already be done for a good day or so of solid icing. And then also watch up into Virginia. I mean, you looked like really good snow here a couple days ago, now trending to more ice, a quarter of an inch to a half an inch of ice there in Danville. I think Virginia Beach, Norfolk could be probably more rain than anything, but you go just west of town a little bit, back up towards Williamsburg, could see big ice, a quarter of an inch to half an inch. And then we'll watch for mixing concerns up into I-95. I think Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, you could mix with a little bit of sleet or freezing rain at times, but you go further inland than that. And this is going to be all snow into central PA and up into the Hudson Valley of New York. We'll pull it up this way one more time and show you the snow. Whew, man, I mean, this, again, the snow is going to be a big part here. This has trended up pretty significantly as of late. These are real big numbers, folks. 20 inches of snow, I think, easily going to mix into parts here in that very purple region. Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. I know I got people watching there. Long Island, southern Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, there is going to be a big region of a foot of snow. It'll be interesting to see satellite imagery after the storm and kind of see all of the ice and snow on the map for sure. But yeah, big stuff. A lot of impacts. Ooh, what a storm. All right, final thing we'll talk about, that is the cold air on the way after this. Let's go ahead and show you that and end out the video there. Well, as I said, power companies are going to be stretched thin, roadways are going to be impassable in some areas, and on top of that, it is going to get mighty cold, mighty quick. Let's skip to right after the storm. We'll start right here Monday morning. Many of you are waking up, the storm winding down for you at this point. Check out the numbers on this map. We are below 0 degrees in those purple regions of the Midwest, down into the Ozarks, Oklahoma City, going to be potentially below 0 here for lows on Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, you're trying to melt some of this, and you're struggling. I mean, we're only going to get up probably to about 35 or so in Charlotte, about that in Raleigh. Greensboro probably won't find freezing on Monday. So everything that falls over the weekend, for everyone that is here in the blue or colder, it's probably not even going to melt on Monday. And then you go into Tuesday morning, you're waking up, down into the teens for a lot of folks, some single digits, below 0 into parts of the Northeast where that snowpack is thick. And then hopefully by Tuesday afternoon, we can start to warm up a little bit and melt that ice down into places like Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Georgia, the Carolinas, and I might have said Tennessee already. I'll say it again if I didn't. Hopefully by Tuesday, we can warm things up a little bit. But then I'll be honest, I think by Thursday, it looks like another shot of cold air. And get this, another storm next weekend. Oh, maybe. I'm exhausted, but if that's what Mother Nature has in store, then that's what we will deal with. But we'll get there. We'll talk about that on Monday. We're going to get through this storm first, and we'll talk about whatever may be next up on the horizon. All right, folks. Ooh, well, that's all I got for you. Again, if you haven't already subscribed and liked the video and hit the bell for the latest notifications, doing those are very much appreciated. And I cannot put into words how grateful I am for the growth on the channel. We've gained more than 10,000 subscribers in the span of like 5 or 6 days. So that's incredible numbers. Again, really grateful for all of you and appreciate you tuning on in. All right, y'all have a wonderful rest of your day. Don't worry, though. I'll be back this afternoon and then this evening with another live stream, and we'll continue to break on down this storm.